The Caribbean is a pristine natural landscape made up of the ocean and islands between North and South America. There are numerous small island developing states in this region, including 22 independent countries and 17 territories. Many of us are already familiar with the region. Its white sand beaches, turquoise waters, and tasty seafood attract tourists from around the world. However, these natural features are steadily approaching disaster. The Caribbean has been affected by climate change just as much, if not more, than other parts of the globe. Sea level is rising and tropic water temperatures are expected to climb 2 degrees by 2050. On top of this, higher concentrations of carbon in the atmosphere have caused ocean acidification. Although these climate change effects can be devastating, developed countries have the funds to adapt to them. Many European countries use impressive seawalls and water pumping infrastructure. Most islands cannot afford these high-tech climate change responses. Colonialism and imbalanced world trade have left the Caribbean vulnerable. Colonizers of the global north exploited the region with plantation-based economies, creating wealth for themselves and leading to the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries. This created a global system of dependency. Resources of the global south continue to be exploited, while liberalized trading from capitalism encourages these developing nations to take on more environmental burdens. Ironically enough, islands are also blamed for the system of dependency forced onto them. Yes, nations do agree that the global north is responsible for most carbon emissions. So, should countries in the global north take on the blame for this global concern? Are developing countries really just victims of climate change? Arguments that favor dismissing this idea of victimhood bring up Caribbean industry. For instance, Trinidad and Tobago has a booming hydrocarbon industry, which has made their per capita carbon emissions 4th highest in the world. Their industry is difficult to reconcile with the fact that they're also extremely vulnerable to climate-based devastation. These complex roles should be considered when addressing climate change, but it must not distract from the goal of adaptation. Striking a balance between labels of victimhood and responsibility is how we can begin to understand the current circumstance of the Caribbean. Higher sea level leads to flooding and can destroy coastal habitats like mangrove forests. These serve as essential fish hatcheries and protect the coastline from erosion. From the period of 2001 to 2010, there have been an unprecedented 8 Category 5 hurricanes. That's almost 1 per year. This storm trend is part of a greater worldwide trend in extreme weather events. Fishing is one of the most common livelihoods in the Caribbean. It is essential to many countries for its employment generation, reduction of poverty levels, and food security. Higher water temperatures have caused coral bleaching, which can create food scarcity for other members of the ecosystem. Warmer waters have also changed the migration of plankton, which have moved to more northern latitudes, followed by the fish populations that feed on them. Many species are now out of the way for small-scale Caribbean fishermen. The frequency and intensity of storms has also discouraged the fishing industry more in recent years. In 1995, Anguilla was struck by powerful Hurricane Luis. 75% of fishermen lost enough fishing gear and traps to put them out of business for at least 2 months. The local fishing grounds they used had also received extensive damage. Agriculture in the Caribbean, like fishing, has seen large-scale disruption in recent decades. Longer droughts have contributed to soil degradation and erosion. In 1997, Jamaica's food production declined 25% due to a severe drought. In the Guianas and other Caribbean countries, low coastal regions are used for agriculture, but can be destroyed by rising sea levels and storm surges. Even inland, storms have had disastrous effects on agriculture. In 1998, Hurricane George passed through the region. It destroyed 90% of agriculture in the Dominican Republic, 95% of banana crops in Puerto Rico, and 50% of St. Kitts sugar crops. Up to $500,000 worth of crops was lost each year in the past 2 decades. Lastly, we know that tourism is one of the largest industries in the Caribbean. The travel industry provides almost 1 million direct and indirect jobs and 1/4 of their total foreign revenue. Strong storms, along with sea level rise, threaten the pristine white beaches tourists fly in every year to see. Because of their economic importance, resorts and other tourism facilities are often given priority in the consumption of resources. Fresh water, a vital resource, is scarce but is still overconsumed in resorts. Prioritizing development in this situation does not seem like a wise choice. No tourist view of the sea is more important than protecting coastal populations and ecosystems. If the IPCC estimate of 1 meter sea level rise does occur, adaptation won't even seem like an approachable goal. Sinking islands. Climate refugee. Typical buzzwords you'll hear when talking about climate change. Whether they're used in academia or the news, it's meant to be sensational. These are real climate change risks that are affecting and will affect people on vulnerable islands. But when does attention cross the line into being intrusive? Hotspot destinations are never short of an excitable tourist with an icon. And now, the phenomena of disappearing islands has shaped a new kind of tourism: dark tourism. Wealthy tourists are flocking to islands suffering from climate change effects. There's a rush to capture glimpses for a limited, special period. Filmmakers, too, are diluting the stories of islanders. One-dimensional victims of climate change and heroes of environmentalism are the narratives emerging from these tragedies. Caribbean islanders are seeing this future on their horizons. Even today, islands are still being exploited by the rich and powerful. Genuine care and mutual respect must be present between islands and the developed world. Recent international forums have shown perfect examples of cooperation between developed nations and the Caribbean. One organization that is central to this is AOSIS, or the Alliance of Small Island States. They represent 44 states and observers from regions in the Caribbean and other parts of the global south. AOSIS representatives were seen in the 2014 COP20, the annual conference of the parties, in Lima, Peru. At this stage, AOSIS highlighted global south concerns about climate change and advocated for limiting global temperature rise and raising over $15 billion for the Green Climate Fund. Based on these highlights, it's safe to say that the forum, COP20, is a step in the right direction. Although we recognize climate change as a global problem, some nations are more resilient than others. Continued economic expansion in the global north has allowed them to easily navigate climate change effects, whereas regions like the Caribbean are dependent on developed nations for help with climate change adaptation because of legacies of exploitation in the past. All aspects of livelihood in the Caribbean, including main components of their economy like fishing, agriculture, and tourism, suffer some decline. Rapid, large-scale global action is necessary to reduce the negative effects of climate change so that we can preserve one of the most beautiful and pristine ecosystems on Earth.